Welcome to Changing Higher Ed, a podcast dedicated to helping higher education leaders improve their institutions. With your host, Dr. Drumm McNaughton, CEO of The Change Leader, a consultancy that helps higher ed leaders holistically transform their institutions. Learn more at thechangeleader.com. This episode of Changing Higher Ed is sponsored by Perdea Education, a national leader in online student recruitment and enrollment services, providing institutions enrolled students risk-free on a performance-based model with no long-term contract. If your online programs could benefit from incremental online student enrollments, visit PerdeaEducation.com. That's P-E-R-D-I-A education.com. And now, here's your host, Drumm McNaughton.
Thank you, David. Our guest today is Rob Hartman, Chief Financial Officer for Columbia International University. Rob's been on the show before to talk about what top CFOs should know and do. And today's episode, Rob joins us to talk about the lessons that he and CIU have learned from the COVID crisis and how they've been able to make lemonade out of the lemons that COVID dealt them. Rob, welcome back to the show. Great to have you here.
Well, thank you, Drumm. It's a pleasure, as always, to be with you.
Thank you. Likewise. And today we're going to talk about making lemonade out of lemons. You know, everybody's gone through COVID, going through COVID, but you guys at Columbia International, you've really taken this to heart and you have done some great things that are going to become permanent. And we're going to talk about those today.
Thank you, Drumm. I'll put it this way, we've tried hard, we've planned hard, tried hard, and implemented hard, if that makes sense. For the most part, it's been very, very successful. We're very happy with how things have gone.
Well, it kind of reminds me, and this doesn't apply to you, is, you know, that old saying, means well, tries hard, requires constant supervision. That's not for you guys.
I hope not. That's not exactly the little saying that we want. We've tried hard and we've implemented hard, put it that way. And it has been successful. I will say that. So we're encouraged about that. But there was a lot of planning going on all summer long to get ready for a fall.
I can well imagine. We'll talk about that in just a bit.
Sure.
But just to kind of refresh listeners with what's happened around this time last year, beginning of March or so, colleges were shutting down.
Yes.
Yours was the same way, sending folks home.
We did. About this. In fact, it's interesting. It was about this time last year that we were making decisions that it was time to take this very, very seriously. We were following some of the leads of some of our other colleagues, and we had determined that it was time to just, like you said, send folk home. We very quickly changed all of our on-site curriculum. We already have some robust online program, but our on-site program is very on-site. And our faculty did a tremendous job of just transforming that over the spring break, literally a year ago, transforming that in literally a week or 10 days. And when spring break, quote unquote, was over, because we'd literally sent everybody to their homes, and then everything was going to be online from that point forward. And it went extraordinarily well. There were challenges, some students who perhaps weren't as serious as others or weren't as savvy as others, I should put it that way, had a little bit of trouble getting logged in, but faculty were very patient. They were very long-suffering. They were very in their lives to try to get them to engage. And we probably didn't lose more than 7 students in the whole deal. And I thought it would be much worse than that. But that's not bad. 7, I believe it was 7. It wasn't more than 10. I know that got lost. But when we did the analysis after the fact, most of those were on the bubble anyway. So I'm not sure it was even COVID that bumped them out. I'm not sure.
Well, it's like that saying goes, a crisis, if you've got problems, a crisis doesn't make the problems, it magnifies the problems.
That's a great way to look at it, because I think that's truly what the result of this has been for us. We saw some things that we were doing, and COVID just put a big spotlight on them, that we had to change this. And it's been good for us. Now, I won't say everything that's happened has been good for us, but we've learned a lot of lessons that have been a cultural change for us that probably won't go back.
Well, it's like Gordon Gee, my friend Gordon Gee says, COVID has accelerated needed changes in higher education by a decade or more.
Yes, sir. I would call Gordon Gee probably the guru of college presidents today. He's got the deepest and broadest experience of any that I know personally. He's dead on. He's dead on. It's put the spotlight
Absolutely.
right on change that needed to happen.
Yeah. And so you sent students home, you converted the classes over, you finished spring term like that. Does Columbia, do you typically do a summer term?
We often do, and we did not last year. That we didn't. We're gonna do one this summer, but we did not do one last summer.
Mm-hmm.
And we usually have a lot of summer activities, everything from sports camps to even other individuals or organizations usually that want to use our facility for their event in the summertime because of our dining facilities and resident facilities. We didn't do that last summer. And we haven't had a whole lot of even interest this summer yet. No one's been knocking on the door. So that's still probably another year out, I'm guessing, because it's not something we've actively recruited, but just people bang on the door because they like it out here. But not this summer.
Sure. Well, you did fall term coming around. Did you bring students back? Did you bring them back part of the time? Was it a hybrid model? How did that work?
Yeah, great question. We brought them back in the fall. As we saw how the summer was unfolding, we started communicating to parents of new students or potential students who kept coming by and new students who were coming by for visits. We were starting to preach that we're going to start. We're going to open. We felt like we had a good plan in place to mitigate illnesses, which we knew were going to happen. I mean, there's just no two ways around it. We were going to have illnesses on the campus, but we had a good plan in place. We thought that we could mitigate and isolate. And so we started telling people probably in July that we are going to start at a normal starting time. And we did. Yes, we were right. We had some illnesses and we had some quarantines, but the plan worked very well. It's been that way the whole time. We've been very pleased with the turnout. I don't know that we've done anything differently, even now looking back. The plan really worked well.
So what were some of those things that you did?
Well, we we lessened capacity in our residence halls. By that, I mean, we didn't have this, we separated some rooms. We didn't allow more than 2 in any room. And we had a couple of pretty good, more than a couple large rooms that if you had buddies and you wanted to have 3 to a room, we were okay with that. We stopped all that. We rearranged the furniture so there was a lot of privacy, even in a 2-room dorm room. And that, of course, minimized our capacity, but we also, fortunately, have an apartment facility on our campus, so we were able to utilize some of the empty rooms, which we didn't have a lot, but some of the empty rooms at the apartment facility to put some overflow in. So we were not losing capacity for students who wanted to live here. We just had to think more creatively how we're going to maximize our capacity, so to speak, by not crowding the rooms too much, keeping them safe. Even the quarantine things, we had to separate some rooms for only quarantine opportunities. So no one was in there unless someone became ill. And that it worked real well. It worked real well. Not everybody, I suppose, would have had some of the facilities that we've been blessed with to be able to do that, but it worked well for us. And in hindsight, like I say, I don't think there's anything we did done differently.
Mm-hmm. How was your capacity for residential? Did you drop from previous terms?
No, we did not. That's what was almost surprising to us. We thought we would. Now, when we told parents we're going to be open, we weren't, when I say it that way, I don't mean to say, some flippant, we're going to be open. We're not one of these individuals or groups that felt like this was a bunch of nonsense and we're going to be open anyway. That's not what I mean. I want to be clear. We were taking it very seriously. We were showing parents and students our plan. We were able to take about, oh my gosh, I'll bet there were 20 pages, both sides, to reduce that by clear thinking into a single page document that we could show this is our plan. And the fact that we had a good, clear plan of how to deal with it when it came, and we weren't misleading parents. We were saying, we know we're going to have COVID. but this is how we're going to manage it. We have a full-time nurse on the campus. She was amazing, and we almost worked that dear woman to death, but she was just a rock star. By implementing the plan, having the quarantine space, cooperating with our food service or the food service team cooperating with us, we were able to keep rolling right along, and we're about to finish our school year very, very successfully. If I didn't see the numbers and see the young people around, I wouldn't even believe it myself. But we grew, and this would include our online, but both our online and our on-campus game together grew almost 30%. And that is just, it's ridiculous.
But it did. Phenomenal.
Yeah, it is phenomenal. It's phenomenal. We've enjoyed great growth.
So would you say that your growth was primarily residential, primarily online, or both?
Good question. It was both. The larger piece of that percentage was online, but we also grew probably, I'm going to say 12%, and I'm pulling that out of my ear, so let's be frank here. It's probably 12%. It was in the double digits. It was 11 or 12% of that was the on, I call it the ground game, the resident game. And I think it was largely because of the good plan, and parents and students really wanted to get back. We had a strong face mask recommendation. We didn't demand, but we had signs all over the place. Thank you for wearing your mask. Here are the risks if you don't, et cetera, et cetera. And I would say the vast majority of our students were doing their best to be safe themselves. And so certainly were our faculty. We put up some of the plastic plexiglass barriers in certain places. Food service people were serving everything, where before we used to have somewhat of we had a couple of stations where you could serve yourself pizza, certain kind of dishes. We stopped all that, and only food service professionals were serving. We think that had a big difference. We had to deliver food to those that were in quarantine. That started out a little bumpy, but got very, very smooth as we learned by doing. So just learning on the fly, changing quickly, not just saying, well, this was the plan, this is what we're going to do. No, if the plan had a bump in the road, we were able to change quickly to adjust to what nature was telling us this is the way it's got to be. And that worked well.
Tell me a little bit about the decision-making processes. I mean, you, Mark, your president, cabinet, had to be on top of this stuff all the time.
Yes, it's true. It all started, of course, back in March a year ago. And when we determined to let young people go home to start teaching online completely, we had determined at that point we needed a plan for the fall. So we had a committee. Dr. Smith, our president, created a committee of individuals across the campus, from the finance side, student life, even our partners such as the food service team, all to be in a committee and determine this plan that we were talking about. And we made it, like I said, a long brainstorming, coming back together, winnowing it out, brainstorming, winnowing it out, and it came up with the one pager that even then had flexibility in it when we started facing real life in the fall. It was a lot of meetings. I mean, that's just all there is to it. It was a lot of meetings. A lot of our summer was consumed by this kind of planning, but it was worth it. I wondered a time or two, my goodness, I told myself as I was sitting there, didn't we talk about this the last meeting? We did, but we're refining it. So in hindsight, though, in the middle of it, I'm thinking this is a lot of meetings, but in hindsight, every bit of it was worth it.
It sounds like from this, you came out with a shared vision of how you were going to go. It was very consensus-based, broad-based across the institution.
Correct.
You had to have faculty involved with it.
Yes, sir, we did.
With the shared governance model.
Right.
And so having this broad consensus-based direction and the transparency both across the campus as well as out with students and their parents, being able to condense it down to one page, I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah, it kind of was amazing. It didn't feel amazing at the time. It felt like it was the job. But in hindsight, I think it was rather amazing. And we're very encouraged by how it did go. So it was an amazing thing how it came out. And you're right, the secret in hindsight again, and I think in foresight, we even thought the secret was having all the players at the table. And that's partly why it took so long. I could just make a decision, and that's easy. Working with a large group of interest groups, bringing them all to the table and getting consensus, not necessarily everybody agreeing 100%. For example, I can think of several people on the committee wanted to demand face masks. But the majority consensus was we want to strongly recommend, but we didn't want to go to the demand area. But we did create safe spaces. We spaced out seating in the chapel. No seating here, but you can sit here. And in the classroom, we had to rethink how our whole classroom was structured so that we weren't crowding people into small spaces, so we could spread people out and you can set every other seat. So mitigating in any way we could to create comfort for everyone, no matter what their mindset was and what their comfort level was, whether to wear a mask, not wear a mask, get close to people, not get close to people, one way or the other, there was a way to mitigate the whole possibility of getting COVID. And I think that consensus is really what brought us together, bringing everyone together.
I think you're absolutely right. We have a saying with our firm, people support what they help create.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I agree with that. If you buy in, then you own it, then you're going to support it. And it worked.
And consensus doesn't mean everyone's in complete agreement. Consensus means the vast majority is there, and those who are not agree to support it 100%.
Yes, sir. That is correct. That's exactly how we did it. And I think many times there was not absolute agreement across the board, but we were always able to leave the room, at least with nodding of the head and some consensus as far as, I accept this. I wish we would do this, but I accept it and support it. And we've seen that play out. At first you think, they really bought in, their body language is telling me they're not buying this, but the actions after the fact have proven, yeah, people bought it and have implemented it. And it's been it's actually brought the campus together in a remarkable way.
And one of the things we chatted about was how the campus did come together through this whole thing. You told me a story about students taking food to other students who were quarantined, things along those lines.
Yeah, that's a great story, really, because we started by just having our food service team deliver the food to those in quarantine. And the timing became awkward. When was I supposed to take it to Frank? And when was I supposed to take it to Susie? And they delivered it to the wrong door. And it really got muddy. And then our students who were not in quarantine, who lived in the same building, stood up and said, let us do this. Give us the meals, put the people's label on it. They're in sealed containers, and we'll deliver them. Because we know where Joe and Susie and Carl, whoever, we know where they live. And it worked out beautifully. I mean, that our students on their own took it upon themselves, and some of them had to get in golf carts to take them because one building was quite a distance away from the dining facility. And so we gave them golf carts. We made it as easy for them as we could. Their ability and willingness to step up and lead at that level was inspiring. It really was.
Well, it reminds me of Texas A&M in some ways. Student leaders. That's what it's all about.
Yes, it is about student leaders. We've got a great student leadership team, and they really stepped up.
And that's what needs to happen. I mean, as educators, we're here to create the whole person.
Yes, sir.
And part of that is training students, allowing them the space to step up and become leaders in their own right.
Yes, sir. You're absolutely right. That is part of the program. It's probably not Leadership 101 or Leadership 505 or whatever, but it is inculcated in our DNA, and we try to make that happen by example and by these kinds of things. How can we work together now to get us through COVID? We want to come together. We don't want to do online across the board. If you choose online, we have that opportunity. But if you want to be in an on-site program, we want to make that happen. How can we work together to make it happen? And people stepped up and made it happen. Like I say, it was inspiring to watch. And it was over a long period of time, of course, but it's just each time we'd come into a bump in the road, somebody would step up, whether it was nurse or whether it was the students or whether it was faculty or whether it was financial aid. I could go on. Those are just 4 that just pop into mind immediately, who really stepped up and led at a new level.
hmm And not only did you have enrollment increases, 30%, that I will say very frankly, that's the highest that I've heard of any institution. And, pat on your back to your enrollment folks and your entire team there. But your endowment actually increased.
It did. Yeah, it did. Two things helped increase that. The primary one was the market. The market was in flux, of course, but for the most part, our financial advisor, his team do a tremendous job of really keeping their finger on the pulse and have really helped grow our endowment by making sure that pulling out and making things into cash at the right time and reinvesting when he thought it was going to go the other way. He's just really, really good at this. And secondarily, while some of our more wealthy donors were playing a little bit more coy, we usually have several significant gifts that we did not get at the end of our fiscal year last year. But what was amazing, some folks who were not big givers, quote unquote, stepped up to a new level, and many who hadn't given for years had stepped up and really started giving all over again. So it was an amazing thing how it worked. I can't even sit here and tell you how it turned out that way, but it did. I wish I could say we sat down and strategized how we were going to raise more money. Well, part of that we did, I guess. Dr. Smith has spent probably more time on the road this year than he did the prior year, and that's made a difference, I'm sure. But a lot of that, frankly, is more developing and trying to encourage giving more than it is asking for dollars today, if you know what I mean, planning for the future. But just the very idea that those individuals who haven't given for years stepped up in a new way as a result of the crisis. And again, an inspiring story of our donors who think, they're doing okay, they don't need our help, suddenly say, you know what? We need to step up for our alma mater and for the school we love because they do need our help now. They've got to make some quick changes here. They've got to spend a lot of money to convert these programs. All that was true, and they really stepped up.
It's wonderful to hear communities, when they're under, quote, attack, tend to band together. And you obviously have that sense of community there at Columbia International.
Yeah, we did. We really did. Every part of the community, from each of the departments on the campus to students to alumni to donors even. And even when I say big donors didn't step up like we were hoped, they promised, and they're great people. They promised that, we're going to be here. We're going to be here. As soon as we get past some of this market fluctuation, we're going to be here for you. And I believe they will, because they've done so in the past. Mm-hmm. So the support has been, like I say, I've sat back and watched this, and I'm not going to sit here and say, boy, I'm so glad we've experienced COVID. But I will say, I'm glad for some of the many lessons we've learned through this crisis. It's been a high price. We've lost some dear friends. We've lost some dear donors. That's a heartbreaker. But we've also learned some things. And if we have the right attitude, we can come out of anything smarter on the other side.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what we need to do. One of the structural changes that had to happen was people were working from home.
Yes, sir.
And, faculty went home, they were teaching classes from their kitchen or their wherever they were.
You're right. Some of the both there. You're right.
But what I've been hearing from other institutions, and tell me how this works for CIU, is a lot of folks are finding that, hey, people can be more productive from home, and why have them come back and spend all the money on real estate that we really don't need?
Yeah, you've nailed it. And we have experienced exactly the same thing. We made a determination, of course, that anybody could work from home, whether they had COVID or whether their family members had COVID. We had to compensate for a lot of situations like that, where an employee might not get COVID, but they had a child or a spouse or some other situation where they had to be quarantined as well. And some, we just said, if you're more comfortable working from home, if it can be done based upon your supervisor's recommendation, you can do that. And we've learned that the productivity of those individuals, there's some of the old timers, I guess you might say, might have thought, oh, they're not going to work, they're going to be late. That the data shows us that's not true. They have been as productive, and in some cases, like I'll say accounting, financial aid, these backdoor type operations who really don't need interrupted. They need to focus and really get the job done and not really speak a lot of face-to-face. We have face-to-face people. We need them. But the backdoor folk that I call them who must focus, maybe the green eye shade, the sleeve garter types, they've got so much more done from home. And they loved it. Some of them, they're still doing it. And I'm fine with that. I told all my supervisors, if your people can accomplish the job, and I don't care about how many hours it takes you. If you can get the tasks, the job done that we've assigned you to do, I don't care if you get it done 6 hours instead of 8, 4 hours. Keep me posted because I might give you a little more work. But I really, it's if you can focus that well, I want you to be able to do that and enjoy it from the comfort of your home. No issues with me at all. It's been great. And we've loved it. And we're not going back. We have a lot of people that have come back. They miss the camaraderie and the connections. And I get that. But some of them more introvertish types and like I say, the backdoor types, they get more production from home. And they do. Our controller, I love her. She's a workhorse. And she does like to connect. But she's made a determination. She's going to take the first 3 or 4 days of every month and do closing from home because she can focus better. No phone calls. She can walk away from her phone, from her emails, and really focus and not be interrupted. And it's worked great. And we have other employees with similar stories who, at least if they're not working from home all the time, at key moments when certain projects have to be completed, they'll just do it from home. It's worked great. It's made all of us sit back and say, what's realistic here? How can we be more efficient and effective? And COVID's pushed us to think about it even harder.
Mm-hmm. That's a great story. And I know faculty converting over to online, who'd have thunk?
Who'd have thought? It's right. Who'd have thought? And some of them, we had some faculty who got COVID. And because of what happened in the spring where they were used to teaching, they were not necessarily terribly ill, but at least when they got past the illness and they were in quarantine, we didn't need to substitute and they could pick up the course from home and teach it from their home, just like you said, when they were doing it. They put the big screen on in a classroom. Students were watching from the big screen, basically reversed, where before the students were in their homes and the teacher was on the big screen, so to speak. When we were in session face-to-face, the students in the classroom looking at the big screen and the teacher was from home teaching. So you just figured it out and accommodated almost every sort of quarantine situation.
That's fabulous. We're coming down to the end of our time, unfortunately. I always enjoy our conversations.
I enjoy these very much.
And so what are some of the things that you think you're going to keep permanent?
We're going to keep the opportunity to work from home. Well, we're not going to let that go away. I want people to be able to work from home if they're more efficient and effective doing that. We've given faculty much more flexibility too. If faculty need to deliver something from home, they can do the same thing. The flexibility that we've learned through this. We do a lot of meetings now from home. We've done a couple of board meetings through Zoom. Who would have thought we'd have done an entire board meeting through Zoom? And it worked well. And at least, even if we come back to, and we will come back to face-to-face board meetings, we have learned that if a student can't be in the classroom, but they can attend through electronic means in Zoom, for example, or other electronic means, we're going to let that happen. So you can still be there even if you can't, quote, be there. So we're going to keep those things.
That's great. 3 takeaways for presidents and CFOs about what you've learned and what you're going to take going forward.
The biggest one I would say is don't let a crisis paralyze you. Let it be a learning time. Bring your communities together, the faculty, staff, all the governance. Bring all the minds, the thinking brains together. It is hard work to get people in the same room and to think creatively, but that's what good leadership does. So don't let the crisis paralyze you. I talked to so many of my friends and colleagues that were just paralyzed, afraid and frightened. Fear paralyzes, but creativity energizes. So don't let fear paralyze us, but get in the room, think, how are we going to beat this? How are we going to win this? How are we going to work through it, around it, above it, however, and create new things. You got to do that. Create new things. Get out of the rut.
I'll toss one out. Meet people where they are.
Oh, that's beautiful. No, I would agree with that. Meet people where they are. I think that's something we should, I guess I assume we do that, but I know we don't. But we should always meet people where they are, and then take them where sometimes they don't even know they can get to. I think great leaders see potential in people, and it's our job to meet them where they are and push them to be greater than they think they can be. But don't push too hard and discourage them, but push them and they can be greater than they think they can be. We saw that happen. This very COVID crisis helped us see that we can be better than we really think we can be. We can do this. Yeah. If you think you can, then you won't. But if you think you can, I don't mean to be this silly power of positive thinking that's pie in the sky, but I mean, if you really do think we can beat this, or we can work with this, or we can work around this, the clearness is, what can we do to make our story told and get our job done one way or the other? If you can't beat COVID, how can we work with COVID? That's the way you got to think.
Mm-hmm.
Transparency is critical. I don't care what kind of leadership situation we're in. You got to be honest with folk. If we're playing the shell game, the team will not come together. If you bring the team together and say, we really want all your input, then you start shutting people down and forcing people into groupthink, you're done. You're not going to succeed. No. You got to really take people seriously, and you really got to put your own ego off the table. Get it out the door. You don't want your own ego in the room.
Your best leaders are the ones who are most humble.
Yes, sir. I do. I agree with that with all my heart.
Yeah. One of the lessons I learned years ago when I was taking over the professional association, somebody took me aside and said, we need to have a conversation about the power of the chair, because I was the chair and the CEO. He says, when you open your mouth, people are going to do what you do. Sit back, get people's inputs, because they're really going to drive the organization.
Oh, it's great advice. Great advice. You learned early. I wish I'd learned that early.
Well, my grandfather had the saying, too soon old, too late smart.
I could amen your granddad. Yes, I can.
Absolutely. And so, Rob, what's next for you or CIU?
Well, what's next for CIU? We have hired us a director for nursing, and we are energetically pushing to get a nursing program here. And it's very expensive to start, but it can be very lucrative once you get the ball rolling. But that's not the objective. I mean, it is the objective. No margin, no mission. But by the same token, we've had a very generous donor donate a great seed money so that we can hire a real genius. She's the daughter of a former president down at Charleston Southern, Dr. Jerry Hunter. And he used to be down at Charleston Southern. His daughter, who is a rock star. She's great. She's our new director of nursing, and she's out there making the connections. We're very excited of where this is going to go. A couple of years, we're going to have a really booming program here. 3 years, maybe. I don't know how long it takes to get through the accreditation. It's pretty rigorous. Mm-hmm. But we're excited about that. That's next for CIU. What's next for me? Well, I'm not looking for a job. I'm never closed to something new. I'm always open to anything new and fresh and exciting. Always. My wife sometimes says, I wish we'd have stayed, and she'll name a place. But I think, you know what? I've enjoyed the ride. I've really enjoyed the ride. I'll buy and sell a house in a heartbeat, or move in a heartbeat, if I really feel like that's the next best thing. And I pray a lot about it, make sure I feel like it's God's leading and all that. But when I say that, I want to be careful, because God gets blamed for a lot of stupid stuff too, and so I don't want to take that too far. But,
That kind of reminds me of the old saying, you want to make God laugh, just tell him what your plans are for the next 5 years.
That's right. That's right. That is exactly right.
Well, my friend, it's always a pleasure. Great to have you back on the show.
Appreciate you inviting me back. I always enjoy it with you, Drumm. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for listening this week. And a special thank you to this week's special guest, Rob Hartman, CFO for Columbia International University and Board Chair for the Association of Business Administrators of Christian Colleges. I also want to give a special shout out to our sponsor, Perdea Education. Visit PerdeaEducation.com to learn how they can help grow your online student enrollment through a performance-based model with no risk or long-term contracts to your institution. Our next guest is Dr. Meredith Wu, president of Sweetbriar College. As you recall, Sweetbriar struggled with a financial crisis 4 years ago and almost had to close their doors. When the alumni stepped in to save the college, they brought Meredith on board, and what she has done has been nothing short of remarkable. A classic turnaround feel-good story. Meredith will be talking with me about how she and her team have brought Sweetbriar back from the brink and what the next chapter of the Sweetbriar revival will be.
Changing Higher Ed is a production of The Change Leader, a consultancy committed to transforming higher ed institutions. Find more information about this topic, along with show notes on this episode at changinghighered.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe to the show, and we would also value your honest rating and review. Email any questions, comments, or recommendations for topics or guests to podcast@changinghighered.com. Changing Higher Ed is produced and hosted by Dr. Drumm McNaughton, post-production by David L. White.